Without any context, Barry Bonds has the greatest regular season offensive numbers of all time, but in the postseason, his numbers were not exactly the same. Going back to his time with the Pirates, where he appeared in the NLCS 3 straight years, to his first playoff appearances with the Giants. The playoffs were Bonds' downfall, but everything changed for him and the Giants in 2002. So let's look at Barry Bonds' playoff run that was different from the rest.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
In the mid-1980s, the Pirates were at about rock bottom, but after they drafted Bonds 6th overall in 1986, things were moving upwards as the decade came to an end. Attendance rose as Bonds hit 25 home runs and stole 32 bases in his first full season in 1987. And with Bonds at leadoff in a lineup that featured Bobby Bonilla, Andy Van Slyke, and Jay Bell, the Pirates became contenders. And after the Pirates had a disappointing 1989, there were rumors that he may be traded to the Dodgers. But he wasn't, and unlike today, the Pirates made a good decision, as Bonds would go on to win his first of many MVP awards in 1990. He hit .301 with 33 home runs, as he drove in 114 runners with the league-leading 9.7 WAR. And like his dad did 5 times, he became a member of the 30-30 Club. But he also joined a club his dad was never a part of, with the 30-50 Club, as he stole 52 bases, as he would also win his first Gold Glove and Silver Slugger. And that went a long way in helping the Pirates make the playoffs for the first time since they won the World Series in 1979, as they won 95 games to win the NL East by 4 games over the Mets. And in what would be the first playoff series for many on this young team, their opponent was the Cincinnati Reds. After scoring his first postseason run in the 4th of Game 1, Bonds got his first postseason hit in the 6th, which would be his only hit, as the Pirates would hold on to win 4-3. He wouldn't record a hit in Game 2, as the Pirates would lose 2-1. But they split on the road, which is always the goal, as Bonds started 1 for 7. And Game 3 would be identical to Game 1 for him. He recorded a single, a walk, a run, and a strikeout in his 4 plate appearances. This time, the Pirates could not hang on, losing 6-3, and he could extend his playoff hitting streak to 2 in Game 4, getting a hit in the 8th in a 1-run game after starting the game striking out twice. He would then steal 2nd before he was stranded after Sid Bream struck out. And after the Reds added another, they won 5-3 for a 3-1 lead. Bonds unfortunately could not extend his 2-game hitting streak in Game 5, though he drove in a run on a sac fly, and scored what would be a big run after recording a walk, as the Pirates won 3-2 to extend the series. And Bonds' single in Game 4 would be his last hit of the series, as he went hitless in Game 6. But he did walk 3 times, none of them intentional, and he would score the Pirates' only run, as he lost 2-1 to end the season. This was a strange series for Bonds, as his walk total was double his hit total of 3, which is why his on-base percentage was much better than his .167 average. That matched his slug, as all 3 of his hits were singles. But Bonds was ultimately disappointing here, striking out 5 times in his 18 official at-bats and providing a negative win probability. And unfortunately, this was a sign of things to come. 1991 brought another great season for Bonds and the Pirates, and in my opinion, Bonds was robbed of the MVP award from Terry Pendleton. Bonds beats him in almost every category, with his league-leading on-base percentage as a result of his 107 walks, to go along with his 43 stolen bases. It was probably Pendleton's .319 batting average that made the difference, as Pendleton received just 2 more first-place votes than Bonds. Either way, the Pirates won the NL East again, and their opponent would be the MVP in Terry Pendleton and the Braves. And in Game 1, Bonds picked up where he left off in the playoffs by recording 2 walks and 0 hits. But it wasn't too big of a deal, as his team picked him up with the gem from Doug Drabek. And Game 2 would see him get his first hit of the series in the 2nd, and he would proceed to steal 2nd and 3rd, showing why you do not want to let him get on base. But he would not score, and he would not get on base again, as the Pirates would lose 1-0 to tie the series as things went to Atlanta. Bonds would get his only hit in the game in the 4th, another single, then he would steal 2nd and come around and score, which made things 6-2 in the Braves' favor. And the Braves would end up winning Game 3 10-3, and in a 10-inning affair in Game 4, Bonds got his single in the 8th, as the Pirates would win 3-2. And he wouldn't get on base again until Game 7, after there were 2 straight 1-0 games. That came in the 4th of Game 7, when he hit his first extra base hit in the playoffs, this being a double, as the Pirates were down 3-0. He wouldn't score, and he wouldn't get on base again, as the Pirates lost 4-0, as Bonds and the entire Pirates offense was disappointing again. Only Bonds was even worse this time. What saved him the previous year was his walk total, but after Game 1 this time, he wouldn't walk again, as all but his slugging numbers aided by his double were worse than the previous year. As through 13 playoff games, Bonds had gone just 7 for 45, with 1 RBI and 1 extra base hit, numbers that would become noticeable amongst fans and the media. And once again before '92, he was almost traded, only this time he actually was for a second. Pirates GM Ted Simmons agreed to trade Bonds to the Braves for Alejandro Pena, Kevin Mitchell, and a player to be named later, but Jim Leyland stepped in to passionately oppose the trade that would eventually be resigned, and they were glad, as again he would win MVP, which should have been his third straight, as he hit .311 with 34 home runs, while leading the league in WAR, OPS, runs, and walks at 127. And as the Pirates won the NL East again, for the second straight year, their opponent would be the Atlanta Braves. And Bonds' playoff struggles to that point were well known, and he would use a little bit of the gallows humor before the series started, saying, "I told my teammates I'll get you to the playoffs. Now they got to get me through them, and I'll see you when we win the World Series." Also adding that he hoped his teammates could just get him past Atlanta. Regardless, things were underway. Starting in Atlanta, it would be Bonds' best and most remembered playoff series in Pittsburgh, and he started like the previous year, not getting any hits in his 4 plate appearances, though he did draw a walk as his teammates didn't pick him up this time as they lost 5-1. And his teammates, specifically the pitching, didn't pick him up in Game 2, as they gave up 13 runs while the Pirates scored 5, with 2 of those being scored by Bonds, after the 2 times he got on base with a single and a walk, typical for Bonds in the playoffs to that point. And he had to find a way to produce, as the Pirates were now in a 2-0 hole. In the first 2 games in Pittsburgh, he did not produce. He went 0 for 8 in Game 3 and 4, with 2 walks and 2 strikeouts, as the Pirates split to fall into a 3-1 hole. But after that game, Bonds and his teammates finally showed up. In their first elimination game, Bonds drove in his first run with his first extra base hit in the first, which started a string of 3 straight doubles. Bonds would get another hit, a walk, and score another run, and what overall was the best playoff game of his career so far, as the Pirates extended the series winning 7-1. And in another elimination game, this time on the road, Bonds was good again, as in the second, he would finally get his first playoff home run off Tom Glavine, which gave the Pirates a lead, and they would go on to score 8 runs that inning, with Bonds recording a single to go with his home run that inning. Bonds wouldn't get another hit, though he did draw a walk, as he won 13-4. And with the way the offense was rolling, a 3-1 comeback looked like a real possibility, which brought things to the infamous Game 7. The story through the first 8 innings was Doug Drabek, who was shutting down the Braves, as the Pirates' 2 runs looked like it may be enough. Bonds got his only hit in the 7th, and it would be his last at-bat of the series, in a series where he hit .261 with an .868 OPS. Great compared to his previous 2 series, and considering he was hitting .091 after Game 4, he clearly stepped up. But ultimately, there was one play involving Bonds that everyone remembers from this series. Doug Drabek was pulled from the game after walking their former teammate in Sid Bream to load the bases in the 9th, and a sac fly brought things to within 1. And after their closer Stan Belinda loaded the bases again to put Bream at second, he got a pop out to put the Pirates 1 out away. And they had reason to be confident, as up to the plate came Francisco Cabrera, who had played in just 17 games that season. Belinda fell behind 2-0 before Cabrera lined a foul ball to the left. And there, Andy Van Slyke in center called for Bonds to move in a little to make a potential play at the plate for the already slow-footed Bream easier, later saying that he didn't want to lose the game on a base hit. Bonds responded by giving him the middle finger. And of course, Cabrera would hit a line drive to left. David Justice scored easily, while Bream came racing with all he had. And with Bonds having to make a deep throw across his body, Bream was sent home. Bonds did make a strong throw, but the ball was a little to the right, allowing Bream to sneak in feet first and give the Braves their second straight pennant. And after that play, Andy Van Slyke sat in center field motionless for several minutes, watching the Braves celebrate right in front of him, knowing that the Pirates' window had closed. In 20 playoff games with 83 plate appearances and 68 at-bats, Bonds hit .191 with a .602 OPS, recording 13 hits with 3 of those being extra base hits, as he had a negative win probability added in his Pirates playoff career, as he would later go so far to point out that other players such as Andy Van Slyke also didn't perform in the playoffs, which was true. Some even thought that Bonds' poor playoff performance might affect him in free agency, as the Pirates could not afford him and Doug Drabek anymore. But that turned out to not be a factor, as he signed a record $43.75 million contract over the next 6 years with the San Francisco Giants, where his father and his godfather had played, officially marking the end of his Pirates career that saw those elite teams come up short 3 years in a row. And now he was hoping to reverse his fortune in San Francisco. And in his first year in San Francisco, he would continue to be one of the best, hitting 46 home runs, driving in 123, with his .336 average not being enough to win the Triple Crown, but he still led an OPS in WAR, as for the 3rd time, he won NL MVP, what should have been the first time he won 4 straight MVPs, and that was a big reason the Giants won 103 games. But in the last season before the wild card, 103 wins was not enough to top the 104-win Braves, as again, the Braves prevented Bonds from having a shot at the title. Bonds would continue to be an elite player, becoming the 2nd player to join the 40-40 club in 1996. In the same year, he became the 4th player to join the 300-300 club, as Bonds is already making a case for the Hall of Fame. But the Giants were struggling, winning less than 70 games the last 3 years, though 2 of those years were short. But in what would be Bonds' worst year of the decade to that point, 1997, saying a lot as he hit 40 home runs with a 1.031 OPS, the Giants were finally able to make the playoffs with Bonds, winning just 90 games, but it was enough, and in their first ever NLDS appearance, they wouldn't be there long, as it was one of the Marlins' demon runs, and they were swept in 3 games. And in those 3 games, Bonds hit .250, going 3 for 12, with 2 of his hits being doubles. I guess better than 90 and 91, but it's hard to judge in just those 3 games. And as the spotlight went to Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa's Bonds 1999 was riddled with injuries, Bonds definitely did nothing to grow the size of his head, and as the century changed, Bonds became ridiculous. He finished second in MVP in 2000 after hitting a career-high 49 home runs, and he helped the Giants win the NL West again. And they went up against the Mets. And Game 1 would be Bonds' best playoff game on the Giants to that point. He recorded 2 hits, including his first playoff triple, while he drove in a run and stole a base as the Giants won 5-1. But after a huge double in the bottom of the 9th in Game 2, that led to the Giants rallying from 3 runs down to tie things, Bonds struck out looking to end the game in the 10th, and he wouldn't get another hit in the series, going 0 for his last 10 with 2 walks and 3 strikeouts as the Giants lost the last 3 games. Bonds' playoff troubles were out in the open at that point. In 27 career playoff games, he hit just 196, and with 494 career home runs to that point in over 2,100 regular season games, he had just 1 playoff home run. But in the midst of those struggles, Bonds would put up the greatest offensive season ever in 2001, breaking the home run record with 73, while also breaking the slugging record at 863, and drawing a record 177 walks, which gave him the highest on-base percentage in over 40 years. He easily won MVP, but the Giants could not make the playoffs, playing in the same division as the eventual champion Diamondbacks. Bonds would re-sign with the Giants in 2002 for 5 years, and again, he was MVP, hitting 46 home runs with an even higher OPS and an insane 198 walks, as he also casually hit .370. And though the Giants finished second again, this time it was enough for the wild card. And that finally brings us to the postseason that changed the playoff narrative of Barry Bonds, as all the past shortcomings and disappointments no longer mattered, and fittingly, his first opponent was the Atlanta Braves. But Game 1 was not much different. He got 1 hit in the 3rd, that being a single, that wasn't really impactful. He did draw a walk, of course intentional, and he ended up scoring one of the Giants' 8 runs, as they won 8-5, and it appeared this was the team Bonds was waiting for. And what was the biggest difference in his performance in this postseason was he was finally hitting more than just singles. The Giants lost the next 2 games, but Bonds homered in each one, those both being his only hits in each game. Then in elimination Game 4, Bonds would go hitless, but he was able to drive in a run on a sac fly, and for the 3rd time in the series, he would be intentionally walked, and he would come all the way around to score, as the Giants won this one easily 8-3, and that set up for a do-or-die game against the Braves. Something Bonds knows a lot about, as this would be the 3rd do-or-die game against the Braves in Bonds' career, and the first 2 on the Pirates did not go so well. But this time he would make a statement immediately, getting a single in his first at-bat, then scoring on a Reggie Sanders single. And as Russ Ortiz was cruising, Bonds would connect for a solo home run in the 3rd to make things 2-0, and what would end up being the difference as the Giants pitching held the Braves to just 1 run, with Bonds scoring 2 of the Giants' 3 runs, which went a long way in helping Bonds finally get past the Braves. Finally playing at his MVP levels in a playoff series, where he hit .294 with a 1.233 OPS, hitting home runs in 3 of the 5 games, as for the first time in his career, he was a part of a team that won a playoff series. And in his 4th NLCS, and his first one in the wildcard era, the Giants were set to face the Cardinals, and him and the Giants' offense kept rolling. His stat line looked like most of his regular season games, as he would walk 3 times in this Game 1 in his 5 plate appearances. And in his 2 official at-bats, he managed another base hit, this being an RBI triple, as he would score 2 of the Giants' 9 runs, as the Giants wound up winning 9-6. And Game 2 would be Bonds' worst game of the entire postseason, as he went 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts and a walk, but his teammates picked him up, thanks in part to a gem pitched by Jason Schmidt, as he won 4-1, as the Giants were able to win both games on the road to start. Absolutely huge. The Giants came back home, needing to win just 2 of their next 3 to make the World Series for the first time since 1989. And Russ Ortiz wasn't quite as strong as he was in that Game 5, getting taken out in the 5th, giving a 4, and leaving with the Giants down 3. But in the bottom half, after Rich Aria and Bonds' bestie Jeff Kent got on, there was nowhere to put Bonds, and he would take advantage, hitting a game-tying 3-run home run, the clutchest playoff home run by win probability in his career to that point. But to lead off the 6th, Eli Marrero would hit a solo home run, and that would be the difference, as neither team scored again, as the Cardinals pick up their first win of the series. Game 4 would be another tight game, and as the Cardinals led 2-0 since the first inning, things would change in the 6th. After Bonds got on for the 2nd time on a walk, After Kent also walked, JT Snow hit a game-tying double. That 2-2 score remained to the bottom of the 8th when the first two Giants got out, and up came Bonds. And with no other choice, Bonds was naturally intentionally walked. And Benito Santiago took that personally when he hit a 2-run home run, which would be the difference, as now the Giants were just one win away from the World Series. And Game 5 would be the definition of a pitching duel, as the first run wouldn't come until the 7th inning when Fernando Vina hit a sac fly. Meanwhile, Matt Morris kept the Giants scoreless into the 8th, but after starting the 8th with a strikeout, Morris gave up 2 singles, then hit Jeff Kent, which meant Barry Bonds was coming up to the plate with the bases loaded. And on the first pitch, he would hit a long fly ball to left, and it was deep enough to tie the game. Basically a victory for the Cardinals, as it could have easily been much worse. But it still tied the game, and it would end up leading to the 2-out rally in the bottom of the 9th when the Giants hit 2 straight singles, and that flipped the lineup over to Kenny Lofton, with Bonds lurking in the hole. But he wouldn't have to lurk any longer, as on the first pitch, Lofton hit a single to right, and David Bell would score, and the Giants had won the pennant, the biggest moment in the underrated playoff career of Kenny Lofton. And 16 years after his career began, Barry Bonds was finally going to the World Series, and he was a huge part of it amidst all the playoff criticism. In the 5 previous playoff series Bonds was in prior to 2002, he had an OPS over 655 just once, and now in 2 straight series, he had an OPS over 1200, with a 1.318 OPS in the NLCS, with 6 RBIs and 10 walks. Though Bonds was the best Giant statistically, the NLCS MVP went to Benito Santiago with his 2 timely home runs. That didn't matter to Bonds, as he now had a chance at the only thing that was missing from his trophy case. And now him and the Giants were going up against a franchise who also had no World Series trophy in their trophy case, and the wild card from the American League in the Angels. And in the moment that he'd been waiting his entire career for, to lead off the 2nd inning on a 2-1 pitch, Bonds would hit a home run to right. And thanks to home runs from Reggie Sanders and JT Snow, the Giants never lost the lead, killing a late Angels rally, as the Giants would win Game 1 4-3. And Game 2 was one of the wildest in World Series history. The Angels pounced on Russ Ortiz in the first for 5 runs, but after Bonds led off with his patented walk, the Giants responded with 4 runs in the 2nd, thanks to home runs from Reggie Sanders and David Bell. By the end of the 5th, there were 17 runs scored in this game, with the Giants erasing the first inning 5-run deficit, leading 9-8 after 5. And by the end of the 5th, Bonds had walked 3 times, including 1 intentionally, and 2 of those would result in a run. He grounded out in his next at-bat, and by the time for his next one, Angels had taken an 11-9 lead. And his next at-bat was the Giants' last chance, with no one on and 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. And Bonds would proceed to hit an absolute bomb. Such a bomb that the camera couldn't even locate the ball, though they could locate Tim Salmon, saying that was the farthest ball he's ever seen hit, as that hit made him the 4th player to hit a home run in his first 2 World Series games. Had this been a game-tying or go-ahead home run, or if the Giants managed to come back, this home run would be even more legendary. But they never did, as they lost 11-10. But they still took one on the road, and they were going back home. And when they came back, in his first at-bat, Bonds did what he always does, drawing an intentional walk. He would strike out for the first time in his next at-bat, but in the 5th, he made history, as he became the first player to ever hit a home run in his first 3 career World Series games. The only problem being that after the home run, the Giants were still down 4, and they wouldn't score another run, as Bonds went 1 for 2 with a walk. And with Bonds just torching them, the Angels decided they shouldn't even bother, as in his first 3 at-bats at Game 4, he was intentionally walked. And in the first 2 times, Benito Santiago would proceed to ground into an inning-ending double play. But after the 3rd intentional walk, this time Santiago would finally get a hit, which would tie the game at 3. They stopped walking Bonds, and in his only official at-bat of the game, he would ground out. But after the Giants managed to get a run in the 8th off Francisco Rodriguez, they would win by 1, which would tie the series at 2, making Game 5 huge as always. And this time, the Angels shied away from the automatic 4 to Bonds, and that was a mistake, as he would hit an RBI double in the 1st. But then they were back at it in the 2nd, and that didn't pay off when Santiago drove in runs to make things 6-0, and this game would end up being a complete blowout. Bonds would record 3 hits, with 2 of those being doubles, as the Giants would win 16-4. And to that point, Bonds was hitting .500 with a 2.144 OPS in the World Series, so he had a very good chance to get a ring and a World Series MVP award, as now they were going back to Anaheim just 1 win away. And in Game 6, the Angels went back to their old ways by walking Bonds twice to start, and after the Giants would score 3 in the 5th, to start the 6th, Bonds would lead off with a home run. This one off Francisco Rodriguez. In a moment here, it looked like it could possibly be the nail in the coffin, and another nail was added in the 7th with another run to make it 5-0. But with 1 out in the 7th, after 2 straight singles, Dusty Baker took Russ Ortiz out of the game. though the Giants still had a 96% chance to win. But the power of the Monkey Rally was no joke. Scott Spiezio hit a 3-run home run in the 7th, then Darren Erceg led off the 8th with a home run to make it a 1-run game. Then after 2 straight singles, Troy Gloss would hit a double over Bonds' head, and seemingly in the blink of an eye, the Angels had the lead. And they kept it, when Troy Percival got a 1-2-3-9. And with the World Series trophy and Bonds' World Series MVP trophy right in front of their eyes, suddenly it was now gone. But they still had another chance, and what would be the 3rd Game 7 of Bonds' career. And in that Game 7, Bonds' only hit would come in the 4th with a single. And at that point, the Giants were already down 4-1. Bonds would not end up scoring, and neither team would score again. As for the 3rd time in his career, Bonds was not on the winning side in a Game 7. Barry Bonds' playoff career was marked with some of the most disappointing losses teams have suffered. And with the expectations that came as a result of the insane stats he put up in the regular season dating back to his rookie year, aside from 2002, his playoff performances were disappointing. But regardless of the outcome, his 2002 postseason performance helped stop his postseason struggles from becoming a major narrative, helped by the fact that this was before social media completely dominated the world, to not face the level of criticism Aaron Judge has for his postseason play. But in the postseason, where he played in 17 games, with 74 plate appearances and 45 at-bats, he hit .356 with a 1.559 OPS, hitting 8 home runs, driving in 16 runners, with 34.39% championship win probability added. And of the 86 players who had at least 74 plate appearances in one postseason, Bonds has the highest OPS by a wide margin, the 2nd most home runs until Randy Arozarena beat him in 2020, and unsurprisingly he has the most walks. And he also led in slugging and on base by a wide margin. So this postseason was historic no matter which way you look at it. I recently made a video about playoff insanity runs, and in terms of Bonds' career in the playoffs, you could almost call this one, as there was such a wide gap in even his 2nd best run. Granted, he got to play a lot more games here, but each series he played in 2002 was better than any of the previous ones. And there was only one more series that he would play in after, and that was in 2003. After another MVP season, the Giants had the misfortune of playing the Marlins at the start of yet another demon run. And in that 4-game series, Bonds will continue to get the Bonds treatment, walking 8 times in his 18 plate appearances. And in his other 10 plate appearances, he would go 2 for 9 with a sac fly, one of those 2 hits being a double. So ultimately, Bonds' playoff numbers are saved by his 2002 postseason, and a few healthy injections. Without that 2002 run, he hits below 200 in the postseason with an OPS a few ticks over 750, with just 1 home run and 8 RBIs in 31 games. Disappointing numbers created by the massive regular season numbers Bonds put up throughout his career. So even though it was a disappointing end, 2002 was different for Bonds and the Giants, who had come up well short in years past, and it in part helped the complicated legacy of Barry Bonds. So like Ken Griffey Jr. and Ted Williams, he is one of the best to never win the World Series, something that Will Smith cannot relate to. Hopefully you liked this video, and if so, please consider liking and subscribing for new videos every week. Thank you.